It seems as though talk of a housing market crash or downturn has been with us since, well, the last downturn. I mean, if we go back to the pandemic, for instance, when the pandemic hit, that was going to crush housing. It was done. It was going to cause all of these people to lose their homes, foreclosures were going to soar, and we'd all be finished. It didn't happen. Housing actually went on a tear. It saw the biggest increase in equity gains by homeowners ever recorded in the shortest period of time. It wasn't sustainable, right? So obviously, the slightest bit of hiccup is going to cause things to come plummeting down. Well, they thought that was mortgage rates when they soared above 7%. Now, while that did cause housing to slow and it did cause price declines, especially here in Frisco and the surrounding areas, it certainly didn't cause a crash. And things now seem to have recovered rather nicely. So this is something that still is on the minds of a lot of potential buyers and sellers that I talk to. They all want to know when prices are going to fall and what's going to happen in the months ahead. So in today's video, I'm going to jump into the latest data and share with you why there will not be a crash in the housing market here in Frisco or the surrounding areas anytime in the foreseeable future. So stick with me. We're going to jump into that right now. Hi, this is Andrew with the Andrew Smith team here in Frisco, Texas. And if you've seen any of my videos before, you'll know that most of what I report on or most of what I share, it's a very data-driven approach. I help interpret the data based on the experience that I've got in the industry, but it's not just theory. I'm not just making things up or spinning things out of thin air just to kind of say a story. What I want to do is help you interpret the data and the information that's out there to make some sense of it. Because let's face it, the news right now is confusing. The housing reports are confusing. I was flipping through Apple News the end of last week, and it was in Business Insider. There was one article that basically talked about what was wrong with housing and why prices were going to decline. The very next article on the page talked about why the worst is behind us and home prices were now going to increase. They were polar opposites of each other. So I'm looking at that going, which one is it? What's it going to do? And if I'm saying that, I know you're likely saying that. So again, buying a house is a major, major decision, as is selling a house. There are literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. So if you're making that sort of commitment, if you're making that sort of decision, my belief is that you deserve to have the most relevant, up-to-date information available so that the decision that you make is the right one for you. Because let's be honest, it doesn't matter what I think or anyone else that you talk to thinks. The only thing that matters is what you think is the best thing for you and your family to do. So hopefully this is going to help you interpret some of that and give you an idea on where I'm basing some of my opinions from on why I don't think the market is going to crash. And as you're going to see, it's not just my opinion. There's a lot of local experts and research analysts saying the exact same thing. I'm going to share my screen with you here. All right, what we're looking at right here is actually a article from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I know it opens up here talking about the Fort Worth housing market, but this is actually talking about the entire Metroplex. And this information is relevant here in Frisco, Prosper, Salina, Plano, McKinney. I mean, it's relevant all across the area. And what it's basically saying here is, as you can see, despite being battered, the home buying market in the Metroplex has proven to be resilient. Prices are continuing a slow climb, though down from a year ago, and active listings are up. Okay. And then it says here, if the economic uncertainty that we've seen thus far in 2023 hasn't been enough to derail North Texas housing market, what would it take? What would derail that market? So they asked Chris Kelly, the CEO of Heavy Holiday, for his opinion. And he says right here that for economic conditions for that to happen, you would have to see very deep and severe recession in which unemployment went up dramatically, causing unemployment to the point where people were having to they were being forced to sell their home. And the number of people that were being forced to sell would outpace the number of people that are still moving here to North Texas. And as he said, he goes, even though it could happen, it's extremely unlikely given the economic conditions that are here in North Texas. He goes on to talk about mortgage rates, which again, as I mentioned at the beginning, everyone thought those would crush the housing market, and it hasn't. I mean, yes, did home sales slow? Absolutely. Are home sales down? Absolutely. It's a massive difference in payment when your mortgage rate goes from 3% to 6.5%. A massive difference. And that took a lot of people out of the market. But it hasn't taken enough people out of the market to cause a huge potential drop in prices. And he says, if a recession hits, Kelly and other experts agree it won't be a severe one with high unemployment like we saw during the previous financial crisis. They also believe that North Texas will fare better than the rest of the U.S. if there's a recession because of its diverse economy and strong population growth. Now, Arben Skivjani, he's the deputy chief economist and director of forecasting at RealPage, said he believes that if any recession does hit, it's going to be fairly mild. He notes that there's still an awful lot of jobs being created right now. And then as we scroll down here, the last thing I want to point out is he talks about Mark Dotzauer. He's the former chief economist at Texas A&M's Real Estate Center. And he's been monitoring the Texas real estate market for nearly 3 decades. And he says, and I quote, no chance of a housing crash in North Texas for the simple reason that there's just no inventory. And if that sounds familiar, it's because I've been talking about it for months. The news is full of reports that inventory is up. Inventory is up. A number of homes for sale compared to last year is up. Yeah, it's up compared to last year, but it's not up. It's ridiculously low, which I'm going to show you in just 1 minute. And he says here, during a normal housing market, he says has about 6 months worth of supply. I'd say it's 5 to 6 months. And he goes, and we're not anywhere near that anywhere across North Texas. We're at about 1.5 month supply here in Frisco currently. And what that basically means is if no new homes came onto the market at the current pace of sales, we'd be out. The shelves would be empty in 1.5 months. And as they're saying, we need 5 to 6 months just for the conditions to be considered normal or balanced, excuse me. And it's not usually until you see inventory get to 7, 8, 9, 10 months worth of supply that you start to see large price declines. And so he said here, the lack of inventory is precluding any kind of a dip in prices. He goes, meanwhile, population growth isn't slowing. The Metroplex is home to nearly 8 million people, and they're expecting by 2045, that number could increase by another 3.4 million people. So if you thought traffic was bad today. So that's just a snapshot of what that article has to say. And as you can see, what they were talking about there was inventory. And it's something that I've been talking about a lot for the simple reason being that the price of any good or service is relative to supply versus demand, whether it's balanced or not balanced. We saw what happened with lumber, and we saw that there was a shortage of lumber, price of lumber skyrocketed. we saw last year as the housing inventory went lower and lower and lower and lower. You know what happened? We had all of those multiple offers. We had those crazy, stupid bidding wars that were going on, which thankfully are out of the market now. Yes, we're seeing multiple offers again, but not like we saw back then. As a matter of fact, the latest numbers for Frisco show that homes are selling on average for about 100.7% of list price. So basically, they're selling for list price or just slightly above. And why is that? Again, it's inventory. So let's take a look at it. When you're dealing with inventory, it can only come from one of two places. It's either going to come from resale homes or it's going to come from new construction. If you look at resale, so I own a home. If I'm sitting on a 3% mortgage rate right now, and I take a look at what's out there, what am I actually going to buy? And I'm sitting on a lot of equity, which most homeowners are, by the way. So I'm sitting on all of that. What am I going to buy that's substantially better than what I currently have, that's going to be worth me trading my 3% mortgage in for a mortgage at 6.5%? The answer is not a lot. And that's what we're seeing. Sellers are just saying, it's not worth it. I'm not putting my house up for sale unless there's a compelling reason to. Maybe they're moving out of the area. Maybe they're downsizing. Maybe they're upsizing due to the fact that there's a new family member joining the crew, right? There's different reasons why people sell, corporate relocations, bunch of different reasons why. But for the average person out there, that it's something that they don't necessarily have to do. They've just been thinking about it. They're staying put. So that's put incredible pressure on the number of homes for sale. So I'm going to share this with you on inventory now. Okay, so right here, we are looking at my weekly market report. I'm going to put a link to this in the description below. You can subscribe to it right here. The nice thing about this market report is it's available for every city and every zip code. So you can look up the area of interest to you, and it's going to give you a great idea of what's happening in the market. So as of right here, you can see this is updated right here as of June 23rd. The 7-day average number of homes on the market here in Frisco is 302. The 90-day average is 211. Is that up? Yes. Let's look where we were last year. 200 in March. Now we've got 300. So we're about even where we were last year on the 90-day average. Okay. But that's where they're saying inventory's up, right? Is what they're, but let's go back here. Let's look at July 6th. So next week in 2018, 1,329 homes for sale. What do you think the population here in Frisco has done since July 2018, 5 years ago? Do we have substantially more people? We all know that we do. So more people, more homes are required. People are still moving here. And you can see how low inventory actually is compared to where it was. And it's been consistently falling since that time. Here we are, the very end of June in 2019. You've still got 855 to 954 homes for sale. Our inventory for the year usually peaks in July, which tells us we don't have much more to go before inventory is going to start declining for the year again. So that in and amongst itself, without going and making this really complicated and looking at a bunch of other different sets of data points, is why we're not seeing massive declines in home prices. Now, as I mentioned, inventory can come from one of two areas. So it's either going to be resale, which we're not seeing, or it can be new construction. And that is the area that most buyers that I'm working with right now, that's the areas that we're still looking to in order to help. Now, there's not as much being built here in Frisco. You are seeing more properties being built in Prosper and Salina right now. You do have fields coming online. They've got their models opening here anytime now. But again, given the demand relative to supply, it's not cheap. 1,900 square feet in Fields is in the mid 700s, and it goes up from there as of the latest data that was available. So again, until we see a change in the balance between supply and demand, we are not going to see a drop off in home prices. I can tell you that they're leveling off. I can tell you that they rose quite a bit during the spring, and now we're seeing those level off. The new properties coming to market they're not running up the way that they were. And it's not going to be long before we see pricing year over year go positive again here in Frisco due to the decline in prices that we saw late last summer and through early fall. So again, hopefully this information helps. It's just me wanting to share with you what exactly is going on. I encourage you to sign up for my weekly market report here to keep an eye on this. It really comes down to supply and demand. That's it. That's the thing that we really need to keep an eye on. And there's a lot of building permits been pulled. The builders are going flat out. I saw a report on Zillow just yesterday that is estimating that somewhere between 5 and 6 million homes is what the shortfall nationally is right now relative to the number of new households that have been created. So this is something that's not going away quickly unless we see something happen that is not in the cards right now. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's a link to my calendar in the description below as well, where you can book a call directly with me. Otherwise, please send an email to andrew@theandrewsmithteam.com, or just try and pick up the phone and see if I'm available at 469-296-5230.